All right, boys. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Mike Kostka. I'm not sure if there's been any introduction that was made. I know Pete through our UMass connection. I played there. I got there the year after he left, so I'm sure, as he'll tell you, he laid the foundation for my success and many that came afterwards. But yeah, just to give you a bit of a background, so I'm from Toronto originally. I went to UMass, played there for 4 years. I ended up going on. I had a 10-year pro career. Ended up playing for 15 teams. So made my way around. Played for 9 AHL teams, 5 NHL teams, and 1 team in the Swedish Elite League. So I'm not sure if I'd recommend packing your suitcase that frequently, but it was definitely an awesome journey. And I'm going to tell you a bit about it today. Right now, so as of, let's see, I'm 35 now. So 2.5 years ago, I retired. I went back to school. I'm just finishing my master's right now in sport and performance psychology, as I'm becoming a mental performance coach. So for me, you're going to see as I talk today, a lot of it's going to be about the mental side of the game. I'm going to kind of weave in some stories from my career, and what I hope from you guys is just to kind of keep a mental note as we go through some common themes that you're picking up on, some things that you might think you'd be able to use in your careers right now and moving forward. Because at the end, I want to have a bit of an open discussion or take a few questions on anything you guys want to talk about. But in particular, it would be great to have you guys leave and feel like you have a couple of tools in your toolbox to be able to use from the mental side of the game. How's that sound? Any questions before we get going? All good? All right. Well, I'm gonna ask you all to put yourself in this position, do a little bit of a thought experiment to start things off. So picture yourself, you're 27 years old, you're standing at the red line at Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, wearing Leafs gear. You've played 4.5 years in the minors up until this point. You haven't played a single game in the NHL. And looking behind you, half a zone away on the blue line, is the whole rest of the Toronto Maple Leafs. There's 2 days left of training camp. Opening night will be in 2 nights against the Montreal Canadiens, hockey night in Canada. And there's 2 cuts left to be made. The coach tells you got 1 lap around the ice. And the only thing Randy Carlyle at the time says to you is, don't get caught. You're the rabbit. So that's the position I found myself in 2 days before finding out I was going to play my first game in the NHL. And needless to say, when you got the likes of, despite how our boy Phil Kessel looks, he's one of the fastest, most explosive players I've played with, the likes of him, Tyler Bozak, Nazem Kadri, some really good quick players behind you. And from my end, I was never one of the quickest players. Skating definitely wasn't my forte. So pretty intimidating moment, but pretty awesome moment to kind of culminate the kickoff of my NHL career. So I want to now rewind back 14 years prior to that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, my journey to that moment, and kind of weave in some of the lessons that I learned that hopefully will help you guys out. So when I was 13, I grew up in Ajax, which is about 40 minutes outside of Toronto. For the first time, I'd played AAA up until that point in time. And then that was the first season I had been cut from a team. So I remember getting home, bawling my eyes out, being a hot mess for 3 or 4 days before I could peel myself out of my bedroom. And, feeling pretty sorry for myself in that situation. I remember, my dad having a chat with me and saying one thing in particular that really stuck with me and kind of planted a seed for what my mentality was going to be for the rest of my career. I did not know that at the time, but what he asked me was, did you give them any reason not to choose you? Was it undeniable that I should have been on that team? And the reality was regardless of whether I felt that I should have been chosen for that team, I wasn't one of the top players. And so really in that moment, I had to make a decision if I was going to continue to play the victim and feel sorry for myself, or start to take control over my career and, what I was going to do, what I was going to choose to put my energy into moving forward. And that's going to be a theme we're going to be kind of talking about today is, we all have the same amount of time in a day, but I think one of the biggest assets anyone has is their ability to put your focus on how you want to spend your energy in that time, and this is going to tie into the mental side of the game. So fast forward a couple of years, I end up playing on another team and then bounce back. It's the OHL draft year, which up in just outside of Toronto is a huge year, a lot of excitement around it, a lot of pressure. Was hoping to get drafted. The draft came and went, and I didn't get picked. So, another disappointing moment, but similar to the previous time when I had been cut, that same feeling kind of came about. And I remember, being thankful that I initially had that experience of not being picked for a team, that reminder of, oh, okay, like what's within my control at this point. So for me, I started pursuing the idea of maybe getting a scholarship and ended up playing provincial junior in Ajax. Somehow Brian Elliott was our goalie at the time, and we were one of the worst teams in the league. I think he was getting peppered with about 55 shots a night. So he was improving quite quickly, but UMass happened to be there at the game, one of our last games of the season. And I got recognized and ended up getting a scholarship to UMass, which is what kind of started me on that pathway. My first year at UMass was my draft year to the NHL. Again, high hopes, a lot of expectations. And the season came and went. I got hurt towards the end of the year, which was, disappointing and tough because I felt like there was a lot out of my control. But didn't end up getting drafted. And again, being reminded of that feeling of, it sucked, being looked over, wanting something so bad, because at the end of the day, it was pretty clear in my mind that my dream, which I'm sure similar to a lot of you, was to play in the NHL. And I remember that time when I wasn't chosen, how quickly I was able to recover and think to myself, okay, these are the moments, and I was starting to learn this. I was 19 at the time. These are the moments that are going to define the character I'm choosing to build in my career and in my life. And when it's all, when I look back at the other moments when, you kind of get on cruise control and everything seems to be good, like those are kind of the easy moments. And the danger in those moments is when complacency and that comfort starts to seep in. And what I started to do is to bank these experiences, and, when I was cut from that team when I was 13, when I wasn't picked for the OHL draft, when I wasn't picked to the NHL draft, I really, I looked at what emotions I was carrying with me from that. And there was a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. And this was around the time when I was in college, I started to think more about the mental side of the game. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, okay, like I have these strong emotions that are firing me up inside. How am I going to use them? Am I going to use them to complain about my circumstances, to look at all the other guys that I feel like I could have been drafted over and wasn't? For sure. I spent a bit of time doing that, but the quicker I was able to get out of that and really put my focus on what was more important was my own development. I now had 3 more years to develop at UMass, which is quite a long period of time when you're 20 years old. And so at that time, I ended up switching my major to psychology. I started to get into the psychology of sport as well. There was a book called Mind Gym that someone had given me, and it really kind of sparked my excitement for this other side of the game. The way I look at it, performance, especially in hockey, there's 4 pillars. There's the technical aspect. So all the skills you guys work on in terms of skating, shooting, stick handling, all those technical aspects. There's the tactical part of the game. So how you think the game in terms of strategy, the systems that you're playing. There's the physical part where you guys are training your asses off in the gym. And then there's the 4th pillar that I think is often not explored nearly as much. And that's the mental side of the game. And the mental pillar is really there to support the other pieces. And the example I can give you, the amount of times I came across players, especially once I made it to the American League, who were incredibly talented. So their technical skills were amazing. Their tactical skills, their ability to think the game was really sound, and they had a high hockey IQ. Their physical abilities were incredible, but mentally they were so weak. And these other three pillars, it didn't matter when things got tough because they all ended up crumbling because the thickness or their ability to just rely on that last leg was not there. So going back to my story, you know, as I'm there in UMass going through my years, I really started to get into the idea of creating a mental preparation routine for every game. I recognized that there were a lot of games it was actually tough to get up for. Not all of them, but as I'm sure you've all experienced, there's games where you're all jacked up and ready to go, and sometimes there's games where you're there and you're just not feeling it. And I remember thinking that that was an issue, you know, that I was like, oh, there's something wrong with my motivation. And especially once I turned pro, I reckon you play 80 games a year, you're fatigued, you're hurt a lot, there's up downs. Like I told you, I ended up bouncing around quite a bit. There's a lot of different factors at play. It never really matters how you feel actually going into the game. What I recognized was how sound is my mental approach to every game? What consistent mental preparation am I doing going into every game to give myself the best chance to achieve what I'm trying to by playing my best every time I step on the ice? Because despite what it looks like when you watch Crosby or McDavid or any of these players, they have plenty of nights where they're not feeling up for it. I would say the older you get, the tougher it is as well as you log those miles. And what we don't see is the internal struggle that they go through. We just think they have it. They have the thing. But what we don't recognize is that they're so mentally tough, and that's their ability. Like I look at a guy like Crosby, like incredible that at this point he's still bringing it every single night. You know, to do that over a long period of time, that takes incredible mental toughness. You know, and I'm sure that there are things that he's going into every game, and you've seen him on the ice. He's very regimented in what he does. So bringing it back to where I was at school, I started exploring different things that I could do before the game, you know, and now knowing more through, you know, my academic training and playing over 500 professional games, understanding the importance of keeping it really simple before a game, but being really clued into things that make me great. What were the things that I do when I'm at my best? Isolate those things and then create a prep routine with a bit of visualization where every game you're going in and you're having that mindset. So I was starting to fiddle with these things when I was in college. You know, I got to the end of my 4 years. I ended up, there was one team, thankfully, the Buffalo Sabres were interested, and they signed me to a two-way AHL, NHL deal. And I played my first 2 years pro with Portland, Maine in the American League. I had two what I thought were good seasons. You know, I just wanted to go and get a lot of opportunity, knowing that I wasn't drafted. I wasn't high on their depth chart of guys that were, you know, getting called up to the NHL. 2 30-point seasons, thought I was good to go. Get a call in the summer by my agent. I'm told that I'm not being re-signed. Again, similar to those feelings I had when I wasn't drafted previously or cut from previous teams. You know, I can still picture where I was, and I felt sick to my stomach. So many thoughts going through my mind, being pissed off at the system, looking at the other guys that I thought I was better than, but really quickly being able to snap out of that and say, okay, well, what are my options here? That turned into be a really tough summer, and I ended up not having a contract. Free agency opens in the beginning of June, so sat through June, July. August rolled around. I had one offer to go to Germany, and was a night's sleep away from taking it. And thankfully, I had a friend of mine who was playing in the East Coast League at the time come over the evening before I signed the contract. And he said, he's like, Mike, if you think you still have a 1% chance of making the NHL, you can't go overseas now. He's like, you got to stick it out. He's like, I know some guys make it from Europe. He goes, but it's not nearly as likely. At the time, I was 24. You know, it was a tough decision because, you know, I had just bought a house. I was looking to try to make a living doing this. And what he said just stuck with me. And so I turned down the contract in Germany without having anything else on the table. And by the end of August, I ended up getting a one-way American League contract for league minimum at a whopping $37,000 for the season, which it's what I had. So I took it. And, you know, going back to that conversation or what I was saying about energy, you know, and how to use it, I was so pissed off that I had been overlooked again. And over time, when this had happened to me, I was always looking for ways to channel it, and proving people wrong by proving to myself what I could accomplish was such premium fuel for my tank. I saw so many guys go through these pitfalls in their careers, and they would pour all that energy into blaming others and for just not, pouring it into complaining. And to this day, complaining to me is the biggest waste of time of anything that you could do. And I want to just differentiate for a second here. There's venting and then there's complaining. Venting is getting something off your chest. Maybe you're carrying something with you that's really frustrating or angering or whatever it is, to open up space for you to take action and move forward. Complaining, on the other hand, is just spewing your crap on everyone else and playing the victim. Really big difference there. But I'm telling you, the higher levels you get, sure, there's going to be times where you're frustrated with your coach or with your teammates or with your performance. It's okay to talk about those things, but use it as an opportunity to shift that energy into, okay, now what do I need to focus on? Because in that moment there, here I am going into my third year. I was pissed off. I was like, man, I was one of the top 30 scorers in the league, in the American League, and they didn't re-sign me. Like, screw them. It's like, I'm going to show them who's, what I'm made of and what they're missing out on. I went into that next season with Rochester in the American League. I think I had 55 points or something like that. I led the league in goals by defenseman. I was on fire, fueled big time by Buffalo overlooking me, and being like, how can I channel this energy into the place that's going to be most beneficial for what I'm trying to accomplish at the end of the day? I'm not going to waste my time on trying to prove that my anger is justified. I'm going to use that anger and channel it into my play. So after that season, Rochester's NHL team was the Florida Panthers, and they signed me to a two-way deal. I went to training camp the next year, and I made it to the very end of training camp. I thought I had actually made the team. No one said anything. The training camp ended, and I was still there. Like, okay. So the equipment man, a little funny tidbit, the equipment managers were all pretty pumped for me. And I'm not sure if this is still the case, but at the time in the American League, they were sponsored by CCM. So when you played in the American League, you had to use all of their gear except for skates, but most importantly, sticks. You had to use them. And at the time, their sticks were garbage. So I was pumped to finally be able to use, East and Warrior, these other twigs that I had used even in college. Equipment guy hands me like 6 different sticks, a bunch of gear to test out. And as I'm holding the gear, I hear the team services manager call my name. And I know when you're in that position, no news is good news. And so hearing my voice call or hear my name called, I knew that was my call to the GM's office, and I knew it was coming next. I turned right around to the equipment manager. He had this look on his face. I felt so bad for him because he felt awful that he had given me all this gear that I was handing right back because I was going down to the minors. Went into the GM's office. They told me I had a great camp, but they weren't able to keep me up at that time. However, they said, you're going to get a lot of games up this year. Go down, be ready. You're our top guy. No one had ever invested that energy into me before. So on my level, I was pumped. I knew I just had to go down, keep doing my thing. And so I went down. They had just switched affiliations to San Antonio. So now I'm in Texas. First 20 games goes by, first 18 games goes by, and I didn't get off to a good start. I had gotten a bit ahead of myself. I think I got a little bit cocky, a little bit too comfortable, thinking that I was going to get called up. I got away from my mental prep routines before games. I wasn't doing the reps of also training my focus. And after 18 games, I find myself healthy scratched in the American League, just 2 months away from where I thought I'd made the NHL. And I get a call from the GM telling me I'm traded. So to add insult to injury, I've been traded from Florida's organization to Tampa's, and Tampa's assistant GM, Julien Brisebois, who's now the GM of Tampa, calls me and he's like, Mike, I just want to tell you, we're really pumped to have you aboard. We saw you at rookie camp and we really like what we saw. So pack your stuff. We'll see you tomorrow. And at the time, one, I didn't know where the heck Norfolk, Virginia even was. And secondly, the big issue I had was that I wasn't at rookie camp. So here I am with the GM calling me, telling me he liked me at rookie camp. The trade was 2 for 2. So myself and one of my teammates, Evan Oberg, was traded for 2 other guys. Clearly, I was tossed in on this trade and they didn't know who the heck I was. So within a matter of 3 months, I thought was right on the cusp of living my dream of making the NHL, to being sent down, to being a healthy scratch, to getting traded to another team that doesn't even know who I am. So if you guys put yourself in those shoes for a second, and you're 25, you feel like the clock is ticking a little bit. You know, there's everyone else who's making it is in their early 20s or even younger than that. It's a pretty big blow to take. And again, you know, thinking back to the different challenges I had faced previous in my career, thankfully I had gone through them, because it had prepped me for bigger and bigger ones that felt like there was more on the line, when the emotions, trying to manage those and still perform, was really difficult. And it was around that time that I started recognizing that adversity never shows up dressed as you expect it. We spend so much of our energy worried about circumstances, worried about things that we think may happen in the future. And those things rarely end up happening. But the ones that end up smacking you are things like that. You know, I get traded in a moment where I'm getting called by the GM to hear from another GM that he, for all intents and purposes, doesn't even know who I am, but he's pretending to be excited about me being there. And understanding that in these moments, it's what you choose and how you choose to respond that is the character building moment. Your ability to recognize that when you get smacked by these things and the hamster's running the wheel and your emotions are going everywhere, that you have a decision to make. And it's back to that initial conversation I said, like, where are you putting your energy? Are you going to be the victim here? Or are you going to take responsibility for what's within your control? Because the reality was, my dream hadn't changed. The end goal that I wanted to make the NHL, regardless of my circumstances, was not different at all. And so if I still wanted it, I still had to continue on my path and find ways to get there. So I ended up going to Norfolk, like I said, was Tampa's farm team. And, you know, with an open mind, thankfully, you know, found my way into the lineup there. And it was John Cooper's second year coaching pro. Corey Conacher, Tyler Johnson, Anjay Palat, Radko Gudas, all these guys were rookies. You know, they were still finding their way, but we had a really good team. We ended up going on a 28-game win streak to finish the season, breaking pro hockey record, smashed the American League one and the NHL one. And then we lost 3 games in the playoffs to win the Calder Cup, finishing the season 43-3. Again, you know, fired by my frustration and everything about the situation. You know, there was only one way, and it was through. You know, I still had to keep that beacon at the very end of the tunnel in mind, because success, you know, it's not a linear path. We look at these guys, you know, some of the top players in the league. And I remember growing up thinking, okay, you get drafted, at least in my situation, get drafted to the OHL, you play 3 years, get drafted to the NHL, go play a year in the minors, you get the call, they tell you you're called up, play 15-year career, win your cup, hold your press conference, right off into the sunset. There it is. That's a wrap. 10 years later, 15 teams later, I'll be the first to tell you that success is far from linear. And as you can tell by this story, you know, what mattered most was still understanding that there was this end point, something that I wanted. The end of that season, thankfully, I jokingly told the story to Julian, called him out, told him, you know, if you're gonna trade for someone, you better know who they are. And if you don't pretend like you do, because in a way it fired me up, but I didn't appreciate it at the time. Anyway, we still have a chuckle to this day about that. But that season, so at this point, I'm 26 years old. My contract was up. Tampa, thankfully, was honest about I told them, I was like, I need to go into a situation where I know I can make or have an opportunity to make the team at a training camp. And they told me that just wasn't going to be the case in Tampa, given some of the young prospects they had. So I chose to go to free agency. And within the first 5 minutes, I get signed by the Leafs. So now I'm 27 years old. It's the summer before that season. I'm on top of my game. I just won a Calder Cup, and I'm ready to go. Like, if there's ever been a time, now is it. And then I don't know if any of you remember this, but back 2012, what happens? There's a lockout. So now the one thing the entire time that I've been working my entire life for doesn't even exist. The NHL is not even there. And it's safe to say the clock was ticking on my ability to crack into the NHL. I'm now 27, still haven't played a game. And again, these previous experiences of disappointments, frustrations, things that smacked me that I didn't even think were possible. You think when I was, 13, when I was like, hey, you're going to make the NHL, but when you're 26, you're going to be right on the cusp of banging on the door and there's not even going to be a league. Like, those aren't things that you can even see coming, and I relate that experience a lot to what you guys are probably experiencing right now, with COVID and the pandemic. No one saw this coming, like, I can't imagine how frustrating and challenging it's been for all of you to be in this situation, to continue to push forward, knowing that maybe opportunities are looking slim at the moment because, no one really knows what the future is going to look like with everything. But the reality was in your situation, well, reality was for me in that situation, and similar to where you're at now, the league's cut was going to come back. The opportunities are going to come back. This will pass. And what was I going to choose to do in the meantime to ensure that I was prepared for when that opportunity came knocking? Because that's all you can ever do. Really, it can piss you off. It can be frustrating. It can be scary. I get that. But in that moment, again, I was sitting there faced with a decision, and I was like, okay, another theme too throughout my career was I needed to find ways to get better quicker than other people, because I was fighting from behind. If I was moving at the standard rate of growth, I was just going to be with everyone else. So I recognized in this moment, like, hey, there's a lockout. A lot of NHL players aren't going to be playing. Some of us, like myself, I actually got a chance to play in the American League for the start of that season with some really good players. And this was my chance to get even better, sharpen my skills even more, because when I came back, I was going to be more ready than I ever been. And that was the decision that I made. I went into the first part of that season in the American League. We had a really good team of the Toronto Marlies. I think I had 34 points in 34 games. The lockout ended. I was invited to camp, and similar to the one that just happened, there was no exhibition games. So the team had to make their decision based on just where guys were at. So fast forward to where we started, or rewind back to the start. Here I am, center ice at the time, Air Canada Center, 2 days before opening night. There's 2 cuts left to be made, and I'm about to get chased. I'm the rabbit to a bunch of guys that have had great careers in the NHL and are definitely better skaters than I am. But everything I had experienced up until that point in time had prepped me for this moment. And I ripped around that sheet, as you guys probably would imagine, as you would do the same. I don't know how I did it, but no one caught me. I don't think it even mattered. But at the time, when you haven't played a single game and they tell you don't get caught, you feel like your whole life is coming down to one moment. 2 days later, I ended up in the starting lineup playing for the Leafs opening night, hockey night in Canada against Montreal Canadiens for my first game as a 27-year-old. That moment still, like, I look back to everything up until that point in time that built, the decisions I made to build my character, to be prepared and be mature enough and to be able to handle these situations, these setbacks, all came down to mental toughness. And that's really, why my passion lies in this mental side of the game, because it was so important for me to be able to do that in order to make it to that point. That wasn't the end of my career. That was, in a way, I feel like, okay, now I've arrived. Now the work gets put in. That year, lucky to be a part of a team of first time the Leafs made the playoffs in 10 years. And up here, that's a pretty big deal. Probably not as big of a deal as the for some of you who might remember the epic breakdown to Boston in Game 7, which I'll take credit for not being a part of that. I was out with an injury and couldn't play in Game 7, but all to say at the end of that season, you know, I thought I'd carved out a spot for myself on that team, and in negotiations, things got tricky, and I ended up not going back to Toronto, back at it, you know, ended up signing with Chicago Blackhawks. They had just won the cup, and ended up going there. On to halfway through the year, I got put on waivers, and a little callback to Julien Brisebois. So he's now the GM at this time, gives me a call, and he's like, "Hey, Mike, just wanted you to know we really liked you in rookie camp. We're going to have you back on the team." And so definitely the phone call I wanted to have that time around. Ended up signing the following year with the Rangers, playing between there and Hartford, signing the next 2 years with Ottawa, was up and down with them and their team in Binghamton, and finally got traded to Calgary's organization and finished in Stockton before I played my last year in the Swedish Elite League and won a silver medal with Skellefteå, which is a team way up in the North Pole, essentially. But awesome experience. So as you guys can see, at least through my tale, and, you know, looking back over my career, I don't have there's things I would have done differently knowing what I know now, but I don't have any regrets with the way that I went through things. Knowing in these difficult times how to make decisions to really benefit what you're trying to accomplish and to not lose sight of what you're trying to do at the end of the day, I think is so important, because the situation you're in is so similar for everyone else in your age groups in most cases. You know, some have played, some haven't, but there's been a lot of disruption to the season for most. And what you're able to do in these moments to get an edge on those around you, I think is really the decision you have to make right now. So that's basically my story in a nutshell. You know, like I said, at this point, I'm just finishing my master's in sport and performance psychology. Really passionate about the mental side of the game. I think it's, you know, looking back to when I was your age, you know, and even a bit younger, 15, 20 years ago, guys weren't doing the same type of training, you know, like the physical, the stuff in the gym, the stuff on the ice, it wasn't the same. So I was able to get an edge by seeking out skating instructors and doing a bunch of extra stick handling, shooting on my own, to make those gains. Now more than ever, everyone's doing it. You know, everyone's getting physically stronger, working on their skills like crazy, thinking, like figuring out the tactical side of the game. I think that if there's an area you can invest your time into somewhat, is the mental side. You know, one of the most valuable things I think that, especially as a young player, you can do is identify what those things are that make you great. It's going to look different for everyone, but really be really clear on what those things are, and then help yourself build a simple mental prep routine that you do before every game, no matter how you feel. It's about showing up regardless, you know, and like I was talking earlier about consistent performance, your career, the longevity of your career will be dictated by your ability to consistently perform. That's what the biggest thing you see with young players. You know, they have a flash in the pan, they can throw a bunch of points up and then be a ghost for the next 3 games. Or one of the biggest things that happens that I saw in my career, what happens to you after your first shift of the game, you get scored on? You know, you have a bad first period. What do you have in place to respond? You know, are you trying to overcompensate, or do you have something prepped in your mind that you know you're going to hang on to and you're going to go back to and be able to refocus on that when you're feeling frustration, anger, you're pissed off at the coach, your teammates, whatever it is? All you can ever do is decide where you're going to put your energy. And I think, like I said at the beginning, that's the most valuable asset you have, and it's something you can train. So for me, that's my tale. That's my story. That's where it's brought to me right now. And I'm excited to continue to share this with yourselves and other players to really, I think, emphasize the importance of that mental side of the game and how I think it can have an impact on your careers and everything you do. So yeah, at this point, you know, I want to open it up. I don't know if there's any parts of the story or any themes or any questions you have from your end, but I just want to leave it open to you guys. Yeah.
If you could go back and ask like your 13-year-old self, or like give some advice to your 13-year-old self, like what's one
that this is the best thing that could possibly happen to you. I think, as you've all probably experienced some disappointments or challenges in your careers, if you look back on those disappointments and what you learned from them, we of course in those moments want to make the team or want whatever the situation to happen. But when we're faced with those difficulties, those are the opportunities where we get stretched outside of our comfort zone. Those are major opportunities for growth. And if you choose to move in a direction where you're taking responsibility for what you can do in those situations, that's what I would tell myself. I was like, this is about how you respond. It's not about what just happened. It's really easy to get caught up in those things. And I'm not saying that you're not going to think about it, but ensuring in that moment to be like, okay, get it out of you. Like I said, I curled up in a ball and I cried for a week. That was my way of coping in the moment. But then it was about making a decision and saying, hey, I truly believe in this moment that if that didn't happen to me then, I would never have made the NHL. I was so happy it happened early. And the one thing that I saw a ton of times, especially in the American League, highly touted prospects, top first 3 round draft picks, get to the American League, and it's the first time that they really face adversity in their career, and it squashes them. They don't know how to handle it because they get there and all of a sudden they're on a 4th line, or they get there all of a sudden they're a healthy scratch, or they're getting benched and they've been the guy their entire careers, and they get there and they don't know how to handle it, and they have all this pressure to live up to expectations of others as well. There's embarrassment. There's a lot of things that are tough about it. And so the benefit of experiencing this early on and understanding ways you can respond to it, I think that's what I would tell myself.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? You boys are all good? What's up, buddy? Good. What's that under your hat there?
I know, a little bit of flow. I'm trying to keep up with you.
Hey, I'm short these days. Handing the baton over.
Yeah. So this was awesome. A lot of the guys, obviously hear what you're saying. I think the process when you mentioned through COVID and so forth of just everything coming to a halt. I do. I don't want to speak for guys, but I feel like they're running out of time. I know you touched on that. With the time that they have, I think it's important. We talk a lot about it, just taking advantage of that time, and a lot of it is preparation. So they get back in the swing of things. They're practicing now. They start playing games the week of February 1st.
Oh, nice.
The time they had, to prepare, whether that was, off season, whether that was, the lockout you talked about, being a pro, like how diligent, were you to your day to day, from being a great teammate to your body condition, to your game day preparation, to the way you thought of staying confident. I think kind of helped you persevere in these kind of tough moments. I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot or anything like that, but I think a lot of guys are starting to take themselves very seriously, especially after some of the camps we had down in Florida, as I talked about. Their bodies, their mindset got better. And they're starting to kind of see, like, the more I put into it, the more diligent I am about my work, the better off I'm going to be. I don't know if you have an example or obviously things that kind of helped you push through through these moments that help better prepare you.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a good point. Like it's such an interesting, you said the guys are, what's the age group? It's like 14 to 18, 14 to 17 ish.
Yeah, it's basically 18 and 16, a couple 15 guys that we have in here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at that time, it's really interesting because everyone's physically developing different. That for me as well. Like I was a late bloomer physically. I didn't hit puberty until I was in grade 11. So like, that was also you're seeing the differences in physicality, and everyone's growing at their own speed there. The one thing that does come to mind though, and I learned this especially at UMass, was the ability to not make it always about myself. Like you said, you of course we start taking ourselves really seriously because we have this almost tunnel vision of where we want to go, and we think about it as this is my pursuit, right? The reality is that it's not all about you, and your ability to engage with other guys, like especially with teammates. I learned this at school, how much that elevated me, because the competition on a daily basis is with your teammates, right? In the gym, on the ice, in practice. The more you can battle with each other in a healthy way, the better you're going to get, right? The more you're mimicking high-end play. And what it reminds me of is the American League, which is one of the craziest places to play. It's called the jungle for many reasons, but the dynamics of it, for starters, no one wants to be there. Okay, everyone wants to be in the NHL. So your starting point is a bunch of guys that don't want to be there. Coaches included in a lot of cases, they want to be coaching in the NHL. So you got everyone who's there who actually wants to be somewhere else, but knows they have to be there. And then on top of it, your teammates are your biggest competition to make it to the NHL, more so than the other team. But the weirdest twist of it all is that the better you interact with, like my D partner, for example, it was between me and him to get called up to the one thing I'm trying to accomplish while we're trying to beat the other team. But the best way to beat the other team is to like work together to get better individually. And I got to say as well, like being a good teammate for me got me jobs at the end of my career. Like more than ever now, teams in the NHL, like all my buddies are now scouts or coaches or whatnot in the American League and the NHL. Like the amount of work they do in background checking on like what type of kid you are is just as much, like they all know what skills people have, except for me when I was getting traded apparently. But they want to know if you're a good kid. They want to know if you're a character guy. Are you a good guy in the room? Are you bringing people up? Or are you dragging people down when things aren't going well? And I think especially at times like now when we're, guys are starting to ramp things up, frustrated with COVID, but taking themselves pretty seriously about what they do. Don't underestimate the value in being a good teammate and using it to elevate yourself, right? Like the more you elevate those around you, best example, like when you're in a game, you have a crappy shift and you get benched. Are you the guy that throws his shoulders down like this? Or are you the guy that starts barking and getting your line mates going, pump yourself up for the next chance you get? Because even that, when like scouts and stuff are watching, like if I was scout, that's the first thing I would look for. What's your body language like after something goes wrong? What do you do? Even currently, what's your posture like? What are you doing when things aren't going well? Are you sitting there and complaining that you have to be in the gym another day? Are you because all it does is bring other guys down with you. And that's where you start seeing guys go either way, So the biggest thing I would say, and at the end of the day, like one of our biggest psychological needs is belonging, is being a part of a group. When that's not satisfied, a lot of things start crumbling. And that's really the foundation of cultures of excellence, and culture is a huge topic among professional teams and the corporate world now for a reason, because if you're not part of a group, or you're not embodying the things that's creating a culture of safety and belonging so that everyone can interact and feel like they can challenge each other without, having detrimental outcomes, but actually elevating because you're pulling the people with you up rather than down. Like you can, the amount of guys that I saw, like they couldn't figure out why they weren't making it to the NHL because they were putting up a ton of points every year, but they were just a shitty guy in the room. And, they blame everyone around them. the hockey world's way too small to be a bad dude. So I would say not only does it help with your development, it's going to help with your well-being and just your general enjoyment of what you're doing. And it's going to help you immensely in your career. Because I definitely got a lot of contracts because I was a glue guy in the room, and I needed to be, because I was a lot of times the NHL was a healthy scratch. So I had to, I had to be a good teammate and pull the guys up around me so that I was getting elevated myself.
Yeah, well said. I think the other piece too that guys struggle with is just like the consistency of confidence. You talked about, just a little bit of, obviously when you're feeling really good, you're motivated to play hockey games, and there's other ones where for whatever reason you're not. And I don't know if you've come across different triggers, for mentally or physically or game prep that have worked to help you get motivated, so you don't lose one shift, you don't lose 3 shifts and 4, and then continually you drop from first line to fourth line, or certainly and throw out of the lineup. But it's like a lot of the guys, that next step is that, you perform well one game, the second game, and all of a sudden you drop off 3 and 4, and then you find yourself in a suit, and then you're trying to figure out how to get back into the lineup and so forth. But I think that confidence piece, when you're feeling good, is great, everything's going your way, finding the back of the net, and then all of a sudden you're starting to struggle and battle a little bit, maybe a teammate's giving you a hard time, the coach. I don't know if the things have helped you kind of work to kind of stay the course, keep that confidence, or to find it back, quicker than later.
Yeah, no, I think that's like, I'd say of all the athletes I work with now on like mental performance, confidence is king. Confidence is the number one thing people come like, oh, I'm struggling with confidence. I think it starts with the understanding that confidence isn't something you either have or don't. It's something that you build, right? A lot of people, like, we don't really think about how it's built, because when we have it, we don't even consider it. And then when we don't, we're sitting there going, oh, I don't feel it. Right. And that's like that ride I was saying of like, when things get tough, you dig your heels in. What ends up happening? You get to work and you're building the things that are building your confidence. And then before you know it, you're kind of in a place where you're just like, it's just there, and it's the absence of it that you're not even aware of. So I think it starts with knowing that confidence is a skill. It's something you build. And how is it built? Through preparation. Now, it's what you do in preparation that's important, right? I touched on it a little bit of, I encourage all the guys in the room to really think about, like, what are the 3 things they do when they're at their best? Yeah. What are those things? Because it's so easy to go into a game and to be thinking about the systems, to be thinking about like, oh, I got to get my feet moving. Like, our brains are useless in a lot of ways. They're really scattered, and that comes down to focus, right? And especially when things go wrong, you have a thought, emotions start kicking you around. The analogy I use a lot of times, like for anyone who's a golfer, when you're out there on the course and things aren't going well, the worst thing you can do in that moment is to try to fix your swing. It's the last time to do that. The only thing you can do is to, hopefully you have one, but stick to a routine of what you're doing and do the things that you do when you're at your best. Yeah, practices for building those things, but everyone, think about what those 3 things are. When I played, it needed to be 3 things that didn't depend on the game, whether they would happen or not. Like, it's not like, oh, I score goals. It's like, okay, what do you do to score goals? Because you're not going to score every game. For me as a defenseman, it was like, when I go back on pucks, because that's all I do all game, especially the worst teams I'm on, but that's guaranteed going to happen. I'm getting on my horse and I'm getting back on that as quick as possible. That's a non-negotiable. And then when it touches my stick, my feet are continuing to move. That was one thing that I made it non-negotiable that I would do every game. Another one was that no one wins a battle over me in front of the net. That's my area. And I can picture that. It's going to happen every game. That was another thing. And the third thing for me was getting up as tight as I could to the play, which got me involved offensively, but also that was gap control for me. And so finding your 3 non-negotiables that you bring to every single game, regardless of what's happening, and having those clear in your mind so that, yeah, because it would happen a ton of times. All of a sudden I get out there, I have a shitty first 10 minutes of the game. I get scored on a couple times. I'm feeling like crap. And then I'm trying to, like, the natural response is to overcompensate, right? Then you try doing more. I don't know if that's ever worked for anyone, not sustainably. and then you get into a wicked cycle. Confidence goes with it because you're like, oh, I don't even know what to do. And I think confidence is so tied to the things that make you great. Commit to doing them every time you show up as well as you can, and having that in your mind before every game so that, especially when you get into situations, over time you build more awareness. Shit happens and you find your mind going elsewhere, and you go, oh crap, okay, I got to reset. What are the 3 things? What am I bringing? This is what I do when I get out there. Because as you do that more and more, you're going to build confidence, because you're going to know, and you're going to be married to the things that really make you uniquely great. And it's going to be different for everyone, but it helps you maintain a focus on what's important. And I think it's a really good way to just build confidence over time and just have those non-negotiables with your game.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, the staples and just obviously your foundation. Yeah, that was awesome. So with this being said, so there's a couple of guys I know for sure that are hanging on to your words and your advice and so forth. Like, do you work with players individually in group settings, things like that?
Yeah, I do both. Predominantly, I'll work one-on-one with athletes. I work with a lot of hockey players right now. Just kind of do a bit of a needs analysis. It kind of depends on the individual. Sometimes it's motivation, confidence, or consistency. Some people have trouble sleeping after games. Like it really varies a lot. But a lot of the themes I talked about today, especially right now with the uncertainty with the pandemic, a lot of people have been facing challenges with that as well. So yeah, I mean, I can leave you my email. I'm more than happy to work with any individual that's, depending on my availability and what I have. I can kind of tell you how it works as far as the business side of it afterwards, and you can relay that on. But yeah, that's my domain. I mean, the mental side of the game, I think, like I said, it's that pillar that a lot of people I cobbled together it throughout my career by reading, a few one-off books where you kind of get a few tidbits here and there. But I think it can be helpful to, like I say, it's just building up that toolkit. Most of my career, I was running around with what I felt was a hammer, and I was just trying to mash square pegs into circle holes the whole time. You might be able to relate to that, Pete. And so having a few more tools to be like, oh, that's right, I can grab the wrench and relieve some of this tension right now. That's a thing. I think those are different pieces that I can help guys with. So we can chat further about that if guys are interested in doing some one-on-one work. Maybe we can connect. I can let you know what my availability is, but yeah,
that'd be great. And I'll obviously share then your email, and they can reach out, and then you can take it case by case. And then and when you give it some thought to some books that you think, I think you said the Mind Gym was one of them, and there's any others that you thought that would be really beneficial for this age group, just obviously whether it's inspiration, motivation, consistency, confidence, things of that nature, would be wonderful too. So anyways, when you get some time, just flip me a line and I'll pass it on to the guys, and I'll share your contact too, and take it from there.
Yeah, that sounds good. The other one that just comes to mind right now, it's called Obstacle is the Way. I'll send you an email with, the book recommendations, but it's one that I read for my program. I think it's so fitting just given the time right now. It's all about mentality to facing adversity, and really finding ways to kind of flip our challenges on the side a little bit, think creatively, and shift that mindset from being the victim to, okay, what's within my control here, and how can I actually use it to my advantage? Rather than feeling like, oh, wow, the world's against me, you actually flip it into a different mindset of, oh, this is actually, if I choose to put my energy in the right places and take certain actions, I can actually use this as a unique opportunity to grow and get a leg up on the competition.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sounds good. So I'll send you that one. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for taking the time. I know sitting in front of screens isn't the most fun, and everyone's doing a lot of it during these times, but yeah, feel free. I'll pass my email on to Pete. If you guys want to reach out at all, have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And then, like he said, like I do some individual sessions as well through through my company. So, you know, that can be an option as well, potentially for some of you.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking the time there. I appreciate it. You guys, what do you say?
Thank you.
We'll talk soon, man. It's good to see you.
All right. Sounds good. See you, fellas.
See you, brother.